So Hercules Invictus is back with us. He taught on Friday, and we are very excited to have him back. His Olympian mission is to promote lifelong personal development, human empowerment, out-of-the-box thinking, creative self-expression, and a dedication of one's unique talents to community service. All of his labors in this lifetime celebrate the hero's journey in myth, legend, spirituality, popular culture, and in daily life. He firmly believes that the human spirit is essentially heroic and always seeking ways to express its innate nobility and greatness, and that a life fully lived, dedicated to actualizing the highest we can conceive, is the noblest expression of human existence. And I turn it over to you, Hercules. This is
Thank you, Amara. I am very honored to be here, and thanks to all who are attending. I interact with people, so if you have a question, I'll stop at various points and ask, and I welcome your feedback. I guess, how many people do we have here, Amara? And now I lost sound with you.
Yes, that's because I muted myself.
Oh, okay.
We have 18 participants. Um, and we probably have a few on Facebook too, and we may get a few more because occasionally people wander in.
Okay. I usually ask folks what they would like me to focus on because we only have an hour, and this is a topic that I've talked about for very many hours and written very many pages on. So I'd like to tailor it as much as possible to you personally, to give you something that you came here to find. So if anybody has any preferences or any questions, if you can share them, we'll go from there.
So if you want to say anything to Hercules, you can unmute and say it.
Okay. Oh, there's somebody typed. Okay.
Um,
Why don't you give an overview? Okay, awesome. Okay, basically, right now, there's been a television series. I believe it's lasted for 12 seasons on ancient aliens, and before then, there were numerous movies and books. It started with Chariots of the Gods, and Eric Van Doniken was the person who popularized the whole ancient astronauts, it was called back then, concept. Chariots of the Gods and Von Daniken himself has pointed this out many times, had a question mark in the title, and it was a book full of question marks. So what he was doing in that book, he was asking questions. And I guess if you could summarize the whole ancient alien, ancient astronaut line of inquiry, it's that they're looking at the past through the eyes of the present and our speculations about what's possible in the near future. So they're looking at things that previous generations described as as birds, perhaps, and identifying them as aircraft. Not too long ago, a bas relief of a woman looking into a device that to people a century or so ago looked like a mirror or a makeup case, to us looks very suspiciously like a laptop with a USB port. So what are we looking at? We don't quite know exactly, but through the ancient astronaut theories, we can compare what we're seeing with what we now know that they didn't know before and ask new questions. So I found this a very fun way of approaching the ancient mythologies, and Zachariah Stitchin especially drew our attention to the ancient Near East, and Sumer and Babylon and Acadia and so forth, and he reinterpreted the mythology that we had in light of this ancient astronaut or ancient alien theory. With Greek mythology, it's really easy to apply this theory because you had robots, and you had in Crete circling the island, you had a protector robot called Talos. And you also had Hephaestus's forge on Lemnos, where he had mechanical women helping him at the foundry. So you had robots, you also had flying vehicles. In the Homeric hymn to Ares, there's descriptions of Ares' chariot or mentions going through the sky. You can interpret it as the planet Mars, which he was associated with at that time and subsequently thereafter. You also had the cup of Ilios that the Theban Hercules stole. Some say at arrow point, some say it was given to him, and he used it to get to the cattle of Geriondas and to get the cattle and then to transport them back. So it must have been a very big vehicle, and it's portrayed on various uh, sculpture and pottery and so forth. And then you have the story of Phaeton, who was a son of the sun who found his father. His father asked if he had any requests. He wanted to drive the sun chariot. And even though warned that this would not be a great idea, he chose to drive it and caused great damage to the earth until he had an accident and it stopped. And then the gods had to fix everything. These are myths. But is there a reality beyond the myths? In terms of the earliest antiquity, we have speculations and we have anomalous artifacts. But once we get into the Hellenistic age, and the Hellenistic age is the period between Alexander and Cleopatra with the early Caesars kind of thrown in, there you actually have an artifact, the Antikythera device. The Antikythera device was found by divers. And it was only later when somebody tried to figure out what it did that they discovered that they had a sophisticated mechanism that was astrological and astronomical and that it was used in navigation. There's very little mention of it. Cicero mentions some such device in his writings, but the ancient world was pretty silent about it, and they found several more after this. So this device, though uncommon and probably secret to most people, was not just a unique thing. It was something that several people at least had. Also looking at sacred geometry and the placement of temples in Greece, you could see that they had an advanced mathematics that allowed them to build on different islands and different terrains and make larger patterns. So there's also that computer with a USB port that no one has explained satisfactorily lately. And there's also a lot of writing on things that they had in Egypt, like, for instance, sliding doors. When we go shopping at the supermarket, we have sliding doors or opening doors. They had them in ancient Egypt. They had flush toilets for a few thousand years before then in ancient Crete. They had coin dispensed beverage machines where you put in a coin and you can get a hot or cold beverage. Something, again, we associate with the modern age, but they had it in ancient Egypt. And I don't have the book, but I've had many opportunities to look through a book that shows you designs from antiquity on how you make statues move and how you do a lot of those magic trick type of things. They even had a form of mechanical cartoon. There was a description I came across in some ancient writings on a show that was all these mechanical animatronic type of things that went through various stages, and somebody actually recreated that one, and it was on one of the ancient alien shows subsequently. So they did have advanced knowledge of some sorts of technology. The Antikythera device is at least as sophisticated as Swiss watches of many centuries later. So there are indications that there was advanced technology in the ancient world. They also had a version of machine guns during Roman times, and they had death rays. I forget who it was. I think Archimedes made a mirror that was very highly polished, and they focused the sun's energy and set fire to ships from the harbor. So they had really cool stuff that now seems very mythic, but also because we've become technological, seems very real. One of the things that convinced me that there was merit in this line of inquiry was my interest in shamanism. When I was growing up, there was a mocking of witch doctors, as they were called back then, for believing that crystals were things that were magical. And through crystals, but if you knew how to use them, you could communicate with people far away. You can see images of the past, of the present, of the future, and not all the images were truth. And also, you could access information, but you needed to be very careful because some of the information might be false, as well. So now that we have the internet, which is comes to us courtesy in part with our mastery of the use of crystals, we're not laughing at the old witch doctors anymore. So, there are indications. And if something happened in our society, how would we be explaining computers and the things that we have? It would sound very magical to people who no longer had access to or knowledge of these particular things. Somebody wrote batteries. Yes, there were batteries in the ancient Near East. Right now, scholars will grudgingly agree that they were used for electroplating, but they might have been used for other things as well. And let's see. The Fifth Element, is that a movie? I don't know if I've seen. Okay. I haven't seen that in a while, so I'm sorry, Amara, I don't catch the reference. Can you
But
explain?
they have it's in Egypt, and they there's like all this stuff happening that's very futuristic and has to do with aliens, but it takes place
Okay,
in pyramids. So
very cool. My wife loves that movie, so it's in our library downstairs. So that's what I'll be doing later today. Um, so yeah, basically there was technology, but were there aliens? And that becomes the question. What the gods are, what they're doing, what they want is very clear in the mythology. There's if you look at it closely, there's absolutely no doubt. The gods are shapeshifters, number one. And if we look at just Zeus, Zeus could appear as a human, any human he chose to appear as. There are incidents of him appearing as an Amphitryon, the husband of Alcmena. He appeared as a beggar in several stories. He could appear any way he wanted in human form. He could also appear in animal form. He was a bull during his adventures with Europa. He could also appear as rain. He was golden rain in the incident with Perseus's mother, the Nai. So they're shapeshifters. Hermes also travels around and appears in different guises, as does Athena. There are numerous stories. So, number one, they're shapeshifters. Aliens have, on many occasions, if you look at the UFO literature, especially the contactee literature, stated quite clearly that they can take on any shape they choose. And they can appear in different guises. So, number one. Number two, the gods are beings of light. And this story is preserved when Hera goaded Semele, who was the mother of Dionysus, to ask Zeus to show himself in his full glory in his true form. And Zeus tried to dissuade her, and she was insistent, so he appeared as he truly was, and she was blinded and burned because he was a light. And if you follow UFOs, a class of UFO entity are the beings of light. And they do not appear very often, but they do appear in the literature, and they do appear in people's experiences of the phenomenon, which is more psychological or paranormal. So you have the beings of light there, and again, the aliens are shapeshifters too. So you have that there, and there were many different types of humanity, and we're one version of it. And unlike in the ancient Near Eastern mythologies, where humanity can be interpreted to be slaves or servants of the gods, even though that does exist to some extent in Greek mythology, there something else is going on. The gods are creating vehicles to temporarily inhabit, and we have an incident of this in the works of Homer in the Odyssey, where the figure of Mentor is sometimes Mentor. He guides Telemachus, the son of Odysseus and Penelope. So Mentor is sometimes Mentor, but sometimes Mentor is Athena. And it doesn't really give you an indication that Athena is pretending to be, Mentor, or that she's appearing in the semblance of Mentor, but that she is Mentor. So Mentor is sometimes Athena in his interactions with Telemachus. And also, um, the gods create humans to meet particular needs. So the most striking example there is the Theban Hercules. He was kind of like double the seed of the gods. His grandfather Perseus was the son of Zeus, and he himself was a son of Zeus. And it's stated very clearly in the mythology that Zeus chose the line of Perseus to produce a hero to help them in their battle with the Gigandus during the Gigantomachia, or the fight with the giants, which was kind of like a second wave of titans that Earth sent to depose the Olympians. So you have that very clearly stated, and UFO aliens have often described us as containers or vehicles. And to people who responded with indignation, they responded that they have a right to do this to us, and that they're perfectly within their rights to create vehicles for themselves. And nowadays, there's a phenomenon that is kind of fringy, and I'll go back to the contactees. When people first started experiencing UFOs in the 40s and the 50s, in the modern era, before then, people still experienced planetary beings. Swedenborg did, the ancient occultists did, certainly, and I'll return to them, and that'll continue what I talked about a few days ago. But in our culture, people were interacting with planetary beings during the contactee era. So you had people from Venus, from Mars, from Jupiter, from various planetoids, from asteroids. They hadn't yet started claiming to be from constellations. And there were some books, and again, these were like low print, low distribution books that if you quest for them, you'll find all sorts of amazing things. And one of the things that excited me was when I found this book. It's called Space Gods Speak. And Space Gods Speak, I looked through it, I bought it, and it's been a treasured possession ever since. And it's channeled, and it's not very well like written. It's not polished. It's like raw channel material. And those of you familiar with channeling will know what that's like. But it claimed that each planet had a ruling god that was recognized in antiquity. So for Venus, for instance, it was Venus or Aphrodite and so forth, and that the mythologies that arose from the interactions with the ancients are distortions of their communication with these beings since the dawn of time. And the planets are not in order, and some of the messages are a bit enigmatic, but it was very similar to the belief that the ancients had on the Astra Planeta. So this set me off on a journey that lasted for very many years. And I believe in one of the earlier talks I gave, where I first interacted with Amara in the Hands of Change. I had given a talk on this particular topic, and people still stop me years later, and they were there and had questions on the presentation. Now, weirdly and synchronistically, because I was on this quest and I occasionally speak about it in different venues, including at the Disclosure Network in New York and in other places, when they were republishing the book, uh, they not only asked me to write something about it, but they wrote a chapter about me. So I recognize this book as something important to my particular life path. And then I was asked when they were reissuing it to become part of the process of this book. So that was really cool. And it kind of reinforced the importance of my strange journey through this particular literature. Okay, I'm going to go to the Astro Planeta next, which is what I was started talking about a couple of days ago as well. So this is a good time to ask people if they have questions, and I'll gladly answer them before I dump into those waters.
Gaia's asking the name of the book on the devices. Thank
On
you.
the devices, okay, I don't have it handy right now, but I will get the information to Gaia through you by the end of today. There's a great DVD on the Antikythera device, and it's called the Antikythera device, and it was done by like one of the cable channels. And then in terms of the devices, there's a non-UFO book that's really good. I'm going to see if I can find the title to that and include it.
Okay. And what was the title of the book you just held up last?
Oh, oh, okay. Ashtar's The Space Brothers Speak, Transmissions from the Solar Council.
And who's that by?
It's by a bunch of people, including me,
Huh,
but it's published by Inner Light Publications.
you got that, Gaia?
Hold it up just one time, please. You got to talk so you're pulled up.
Okay, can you see it?
Stars, the space.
Well,
Space. What is that?
you're-
What I'll do is I will put a link to it on Amazon in the description on my page, so this way anybody can click on it and go there.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
I'd probably like to get one for the Coven Library.
Oh, awesome. So let's see. Okay, so Gaia asked the question too. The book you held up. DNA of the gods spliced with that of the highest primate on earth at the time in order to create those slaves. That was one argument. Yes, in the ancient Near East, that is the argument. In the Greek mythology, that often wasn't the case. Although people did serve the gods and sometimes slavishly, priests and priestesses, believe it or not, were not very highly respected. When Odysseus came back from the Odyssey, and he killed everybody that was in his household, the suitors, as they were called, who wanted Penelope to marry one of them. He had to deal with all sorts of political implications from killing the nobles, but nobody, complained that he killed all those priests who were in attendance. So there's the Greek words explain this better for worship. There's timi, and timi means to honor. And the other word for worship is latria, and latria is slavish devotion. So timi implied a kinship, and latria was like the relationship you had with an overlord or a ruler. So you could approach the gods from different angles. And again, the Greeks believed that the gods mingled their ichor or their blood, with ours to create demigods. And when I was growing up, and I'm not thousands of years old in this incarnation, but even when I was growing up in the 50s and the 60s, Greeks believed very literally that they weren't the same thing as other people. They had the blood of gods, kings, and heroes in them, like in the song at the beginning of Hercules and Xena. So that's an ingrained belief. And even though Greece is no longer Olympian in their spirituality for the most part, although there are small pockets. When Greece was burning that time, the first thing they went to protect were their ancient ruins. So there's that whole weird relationship. I went to a Greek parochial school, which is Greek Orthodox sponsored, and I spent years being taught about not only Greek mythology, but Greek philosophy, ancient Greek language, ancient Greek religions, and not only the philosophies, but also things like theurgy. So again, we have this weirdness when you're Greek. There's even a heaven for virtuous pagans. So if you're Greek, and you're good, even if you're not going to the heaven everybody else is going, you can go there. And since a small child, my parents thought I was slated for there, and they told me that not to worry about it because we can visit each other. So that's because we're Greek, and why wouldn't we be able to visit in different heavens? It would be cruel of any god to deprive you of visiting your family. So that belief still persists in some form or fashion to the present day. Okay, let me see if there are any other questions. There's a couple of excellent books written about the DNA of the gods, by the way. And in my podcast, we've interviewed several of the authors, and they have a lot of things that I can't speak to because I don't really have a medical background, so I can't address the veracity of it. Okay, in ancient times, the ancients had a different concept of how the universe is put together than we do. And basically, you had Earth, and we're all on the Earth, and the Earth was something the gods shared. And there was like almost what you call a shamanic model after that. And we're going to focus on the top part now. On the under part, you had the underworld, but on top you had the heavens, and in between the earth and the vault of heaven, which you could think of like a bowl, there were different circles, and each circle was assigned a planet. And if you look at writings from like the early parts of the Christian era, where some of the world was still pagan and they argued about these things in their demonologies and angelologies and so forth, you'll hear many rants about the spirits of the air and their equation with devils and the old gods. That's because, again, they believed that there were these circles, like a rainbow, let's say, because there were seven, and each one had one of the luminaries of the classical planets, the five classical planets, which the ancients believed were underneath the vault of heaven. So now we believe that these things are beyond our atmosphere or beyond the vault of heaven. But in antiquity, beyond that, there was something mysterious called the pleroma, or now I'm drawing a blank. It was we'll call it the pleroma for now, or the Empyrean. So that was mysterious, and the ziggurat, amongst other things, the seven-stepped pyramid, took you to each of these heavens, which was ruled by a god. And this is the belief I found in distorted form, but in this book, which led me on this quest to begin with. And it's very old, and not a lot of attention has been drawn to it from the perspective of ancient aliens and mythic spirituality and ancient astrological mythology. But the ancients believed that these spirits of the air, with their orbits and their heavens, control different aspects of our lives. And this is something you could find in the back of any book on magic, these correspondences. And it was our goal to join the gods in heaven. So there were invitations to make us go through the heavens of every god until we reached the place beyond the terrestrial heavens into the unknown. So to the ancients, the vault of sky or the vault of heaven was heaven, literally. So did you know that Hercules went to heaven? Of course you did. There is constellation. He can see you from heaven. And everything in heaven could see you, and you can get to heaven. And our concept of stardom or celebrity preserves this to the modern day. That certain people, and you didn't have to be a good person, you just had to be like a famous person. And one of the Elysiums, or the afterworlds in the Greek, is kind of like a glam Elysium where famous people go. And there, the point wasn't to obey the gods or be like the gods, but to entertain the gods. So if you sufficiently entertain the gods, you end up in glam Elysium. And then there were other types of Elysiums. There was an Elysium for mystics. There was an Elysium for good people, you know. So there were different types of heavens you can go to, but one of them was very like National Enquirer type of heaven, or internet YouTube type of heaven. So there was that. But the stories of the gods were not instructional in the sense that this is how you had to be. And this is where a lot of people, say horrible things about the Greek gods. The myths are stories about things that can happen if you're a certain way. So if you're warlike, if you're rough, if you're contentious, these are the types of things that can happen. So it's not instructions for what you should do, but maybe, a reminder of why you shouldn't do certain things, because there are consequences. And the planets were arranged in different orders at different times as their understanding of the placement of things in heaven transpired. And this is what confuses a lot of beginners to these correspondences, that they contradict each other. They're not all the same. Think of it that these all reflect the best understanding of a particular bunch of people at a particular bunch of time, or the best individual understanding of the person who put the list together. And if you stop looking for like the one true way, because there isn't one, it keeps changing. Our understanding keeps changing, so how we put things together. And what drove this home for me was when I first started trying to equate the modern theosophies that included UFOs and all sorts of ancient Near Eastern elements with the ancient theosophies. I saw that they had reversed the order of the planets and that they had assigned different colors. And I could clearly see, after studying this for a while, that they were trying to put the planets in our way of understanding the order of the planets. So, they would start off with Mercury, with Venus. Then, because we're on the Earth and it's from the perspective of the Earth, they wouldn't include the Earth, although some of them, like Mark Gauge, for instance, include the Earth in there too. But they would put the moon in its place and ignore all other moons. And then they'd have the classical planets, but in the order that we place them in. And unlocking a lot of mythology with this system produces a lot of interesting insights. Like, for instance, the Most High, and that is the God of the Old Testament. That's one of his titles. In ancient times, they equated him with Saturn, or Kronos, as he's known if you're into Greek mythology. And he's a jealous God. He ate his children. He demanded obedience and so forth. But he was also the king of one of the Elysiums, and he ruled during the Golden Age. So he had that whole heavenly aspect to him to counterbalance the other parts of his being. And in many of the old charts, he's perceived as being the highest in this level of heavens, near the vault of heaven itself, or near the Pleroma or the Empyrean. So that's why he's called the Most High. And the Saturnalia was dedicated to him, and his holy day was Saturday. Saturday is Saturn's day. So that's the Sabbath of people who follow, the one God of the monotheistic ancient Near Eastern religions. So you get to see the gods in their different masks through this very simple device and this very simple system, and it holds true to the present time. So you have the sun, the moon, and the 5 classical planets in various orders throughout the initiation systems of antiquity. And the purpose is, and it's very clearly demonstrated in Mithraism, that has it in the most organized manner, and there's a lot of information currently available on Mithraism, where it's a grade of initiations. It's a stairway to heaven and beyond. So the different heavens were encountered by the heroes in the myths, or they encountered the different gods, or when you introduce the zodiac, which we're not going to get to today, then you have other things to introduce as well. But these stories contain astrological significance, and they were used for navigation. So what we interpret as stories were actually like maps. And that was just one level of their meaning. So these people that had like the Antikythera device, for instance, they also had a body of lore, and the Phoenicians who started sharing this lore and were the foundation for planting it in different places, made sure that it was preserved in the stories, in plastic art and so forth, so that people who knew the secret language or the navigation language could get to different places on the map through these stories by incorporating the different planets and their configurations and the astrological symbols and so forth. So just like on a spiritual level, you could take the stairway to heaven itself. Using the navigation model, you could use this to navigate here on the Earth. And this also starts an interesting inquiry as to the placement of sacred sites, because they did have sacred geometry and they did place things in various locations according to ley lines and other energetic places, or to reflect astrological phenomena in the sky. So there too, it's a doorway into the astrological and astronomical, which were not separate things back then, knowledge of these ancient people and how advanced it truly was. My personal opinion is that the ancient alien or ancient astronaut lore does prove that there was an ancient civilization, a world-spanning organization, a world-spanning civilization. I don't know if they came from outer space because you can use the lore of the astroplaneta or the planetary spirits to explain a lot of the encounters that people had in antiquity and that they still have now, even collectively as contactees, than actual aliens from outer space. And also in the Greek myths, it's very clear that they didn't use test tubes or DNA, it was selective breeding. They had sex with us, basically. Yeah, and that's described time and time and time again in the myths. Recently, there was a UFO book that was sent by one of the companies for review, and they also took this view and explained it in the book that the mythology does not support the DNA theory, attractive as it is, because in the ancient myths there was more of the having relationships with and getting pregnant and so forth. And that does still happen also, by the way, especially among the contactee literature. There are like space babies. In some of the gray literature with the UFO beings with the bulbous heads and the big eyes, there's often babies involved. People are shown babies. In the fairy lore, which mirrors this in a very interesting way too, there's the same type of lore. So, in terms of what the gods actually are, they're beings of light. They can change their shape. They have since the dawn of times associated themselves with planets and planetary bodies. They are physical when they want to be, but they're not physical all the time. They can be like us. They can interbreed with us, but they can also become invisible and operate on levels where, as a mortal, quote unquote, you need specialized training to interact with them. So we need ritual. We need dream work. We need all sorts of different techniques to open our being to the levels where these beings normally function. And everything that they've given us, as far as I can tell, in my particular exploration, is one, they want to smash our concepts, to show us repeatedly, despite what form they take or what mythology they decide to communicate through, that there's something beyond what we think reality is all about. So that seems to be a constant in the mythology, in the folklore, and in the UFO literature, that there's something more than what you think is there. So to start opening up our minds. And then because of their heavenly associations, whether in our literature or in the actual sky itself through the constellations or in the symbol of the ascending sphere that goes past the earth and beyond, there's that invitation to join them. And even in the UFO literature, that kinship is somewhere there, either highlighted or hinted at. But it's calling upon us to rejoin our divine parents in the heaven, in whatever concept we happen to have, and then to break the concepts we have and to realize that we too are divine. Any questions for that so far? Then I'll conclude.
I have a question. Do you
Okay.
have an opinion about the idea all gods are one god and all goddesses are one goddess and there's one initiator?
Yeah, it's true and not true. Like there's the hard and soft polytheism theories. I have explored this like for a lifetime, as have many of you, and I found that the gods will make communication easy with us. So they'll use whatever system of belief we happen to have, um, and it's the same if you work with dreams. So let's say you become enamored of Jungian dream interpretation. Your dreams will become very Jungian. If you study Freud and that resonates, your dreams will become Freudian. Adler, the same thing. Edgar Cayce, any way you have of approaching dreams, the dreams will accommodate you. And it seems to be true with the gods as well. Um, I I know that ultimately there's one because we're all energy. But in terms of the gods, there appear to be a finite number of them. And through cultures, you can experience them in different ways, and they do have masks that they wear in different cultures. And I played hide and seek with my operant archetype, mythic ancestor, so forth, Hercules, and I found him in many different cultures. I found him in the Dagda and Ogmius in the Celtic tradition. I found him in Thor the Thunderer and Donar, and all the thunders of the northern tradition. He's in his various iterations as Hercules and Hercule and Ecoli in the Mediterranean. Um, Recently, I've been looking into the Egyptian because Herodotus hinted that he's there too, and I couldn't understand the association with Shu initially, but now it's starting to make more sense to me. For many years, I've studied Melkart, who's the Tyrian Hercules, and in antiquity, he was pretty much interchangeable with Hercules, even though they were originally a bit different. Like Hercules was different from Heracles as well initially, but they kind of blended into one. So I believe that there's one, and then there's a polarity, and then there's a multiplicity. And we are all things, but more so of some things than other things, just like the multiplicity is, and that it's all a vast communication system. I personally believe that we're the gods here, or we're the dream of the gods, or the video game personas of the gods, or any way you want to choose to look at that. And that it's not in an ego type of sense, because in a way you have to put aside your concept of ego. Your ego is the little arrow on the computer that points at things. So it gives you access to different states of reality and enough awareness to make sense of them, but it's not who you are. And looked at from that way, there are different states of being, each one leading you towards greater unity with the source, with the one. And this could be likened to the different ladder steps of the ziggurat in the ancient Near East that brings you to the sun portal on top and in the heavens beyond. So you can interact with the gods in their cultural guises and their people on that level, and they're very real on that level, but also behind them there's a pattern that expresses itself through these different cultural masks. So I believe that both are true. It's a matter of perspective, where you're standing at any particular time, what you see and what'll work for you.
Thank you. That was great.
I just wanted to say that I totally agree with Hercules and Invictus. I am a polytheist, but I'm also a monist. I believe that there are many different deities, and they are in the plasma forces above the earth. They all have their own powers and their own personalities. However, they are almost a form of one single gem in which there are many facets, and that is part of the one. And that is the whole, that is the universe, the one song. And both dualistically can exist at once. So I'm on the same page with you theologically.
And it's interesting the way you expressed yourself, because I don't know if you're familiar with like the neo-theosophical systems that arose after Blavatsky, after the Ballards. Theosophy underwent several permutations, but one of the groups has expressed their understanding of the one and the many in terms of the gem and in terms of the fire in heaven that's in the atmosphere and so forth. So what you perceive has been perceived by others and described in much the same way. So that is incredibly awesome, and I'd love to continue this conversation with you, maybe on Facebook or at another time, because that is awesome. Hi.
Hi, Hercules, I have a question for you. And this might be more of your opinion than evidence, if there isn't much evidence known. But so if these beings, these gods, were having so much contact with our ancient ancestors, Has there ever been any source to say why that has stopped, at least to that level that it looks like we see in historical evidence?
It hasn't stopped. It's still going on today. And again, everything I share is my opinion, and my opinion is can change, and it often does. And when I do workshops, I make that very clear that I'm sharing my greatest understanding based on 60 plus years of exploring this type of stuff. But one of you might say something that'll blow my mind and have me think of something in a different way, and that happens periodically where my knowledge will reframe, in which point I will share that. But anything I've expressed ever is, just think of it as my opinion. But I don't believe that it stopped. I believe that people stopped sharing information because for very many points in our history, they could be jailed or killed or locked up for talking about these types of things. But in my different workshops that I do and in the different groups that I occasionally hold, the gods are just as active as they were in antiquity. Would you like me to share an example that happened recently? Okay, I was meditating. I love meditating. I meditate twice a day. And in one of my meditations, very vividly, I saw the statue of Zeus in Olympia, one of the wonders of the world. And the statue started communicating with me, and it started talking about like fatherhood issues, and started talking about like the fatherhood of his fatherhood specifically, and how we're his children, and he wants what fathers want from his children. And and told me that I'm a father. What do I expect as a father for my children? And I answered, and he said that that's what he would like as well in his relationships with his children. So that was interesting. And again, I didn't class it immediately as a communication from Zeus. It could have been some aspect of my mind. It could have been a dream figure. Anyway, the communication was interesting and definitely worth thinking about. So I put it in the shelf in my mind, and I knew I would return to it in subsequent meditations to see where the understanding took me, because that's what's important. Not that I talked to Zeus, but that understanding was important. So I was working with one of the cosmic groups, and Zeus has been revealing himself to them through their local universe father. The terminology is, again, outer spacey, which happened in antiquity too. But anyway, I learned their vocabulary, so we were communicating. And they told me that Zeus had a message for me. So they asked me if I wanted, and I said, of course. So what they told me was that God the Father wants to be loved by his children the same way an earthly father, So, okay, this isn't totally in my head now because someone's giving me this information. Then a Hermetic child of Hecate that I know in Chicago, in our communications by phone, he told me that Zeus had a message for me. I said, tell me what he said. So again, it was the whole thing with the relationship between sons and fathers. So at this point, I had to admit that this was not in my head, that I was getting a communication from something that was communicating with other people, and to get my attention, it's telling me the same things. And I guess I can be dense at times because this presence, Zeus, let's call him, started giving me more synchronicities than I could shake a stick at, where father and son issues kept popping up all over the place in my world, plus the name Zeus. So there was a signature there. So this was a communication from Zeus, I can safely assume. I don't know 100%, nobody knows 100%, but it happened in the here and now. And when I do this type of when I deal with this topic and interact with people who are also immersed in the same reality, the gods are interacting all the time. They're always communicating through dreams, through synchronicities, through messages. They're making themselves known in a wide variety of ways. So I don't see any difference between what they did in antiquity and what they're doing now. It's just that now we're conditioned to see reality differently, and we're unlikely to meet people who see things and interpret things the same way. So we're not going to get, we're going to get, I was thinking in my meditation, and all of a sudden it came to me that, and then I had synchronicities, and Zeus becomes irrelevant in looking at things that way. But if you're looking at things mythically, then it becomes important. And yesterday I did something at the Amber Dragon. I started a new series of groups. And because we've been doing this for a few years together, it's very easy to slip into from the waking world reality into the mythic reality. And it happened with the group within a few minutes of just conversation, where all of a sudden we were communicating not just from the perspective of here, but from the perspective of inner states. So myth was just a couple of steps away. Sorry for the long-winded answer. Does that address your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Let me see. Anybody? Somebody wrote, my father did top secret work for the government when he was in body. He was a believer in ETs, but despite the proddings of my older sisters, I was too young. He would not elaborate on it. It was his Chariots of the Gods that I discovered in my teens. Yes, if you do the type of thing that we do, and especially if you deal with UFOs, if not directly or indirectly, you will be contacted. And this sounds paranoid, but it isn't. But you'll be contacted by people who are in some sort of intelligence, type of thing. I've had naval intelligence, I've had army intelligence, I've had people from Homeland Security showing up in my UFO lectures, or people claiming to be them. Some of them I was able to Google and find out that they were telling me the truth. But there's a whole other reality there, and the subject of the alien bodies always comes up with these people. I don't know if it's true, I don't know if it's misinformation, I really don't know, but that's part of that mythology and that reality, and just about everyone I know who's been in that reality, rather than experiencing living myths, they experience living conspiracy theories.
That's very funny. I just want to give you a heads up. It's about 9 minutes to the
Oh, okay.
next class, so I know you probably want to give some information about how to reach you for the people who weren't on in the very beginning of the class, and what you all are up to.
Okay. Thank you everybody for coming. I really appreciate it. I wish we were in person, and hopefully after the pandemic we can be. The easiest and best way to reach me is on Facebook. Just send a friend request, and I'll friend you, and then you'll know everything that I'm doing. Currently, I'm a podcaster more than anything else. I have a daily podcast. It ranges from everything to living mythology to conspiracy theories to cryptids to ghosts to UFOs. And I'm also covering like local politics, so you name it, it's somewhere in the soup that I swim in. At the Amber Dragon, we started face-to-face classes again. It's mass, limited participation, and social distancing. There, we're covering limited views into Greek magic. So we did Kirki, or Circe as she's called. For the first one, we're going to cover Pythia, Kalhas, all the different figures that represent different types of Greek magic. And we're going to do something Greek and magical to give you a taste of what that's all about. So that'll be like an introduction to the topic. And we're putting together a workbook so that after we go through a year of this, other people can just read about it and explore on their own. And that's the best way to reach me, Facebook.
That's awesome. I'd love
Thank
to
you.
get my hands on a copy of a workbook like that. Sounds fun.
Everyone have a wonderful day, and you're awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hercules. We really enjoyed this class. I'm pretty sure everyone was, hugely typing in the chat, and we're, lots of good discussion and a bunch of thank yous. Somebody's writing Greek magic is my main practice. Love it.
Awesome.
So yeah, it was so great to have you here and to have that perspective. And I have not been a big proponent of the ancient astronaut theory, but I found a lot of what you were saying very compelling. So thank you for opening my eyes.
Thank you very much. And if anyone wants to share their path on the podcast too, just let me know. We're always looking for great guests. Have a
Excellent.
great day, everybody.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much.
Take care.
I do know that we have our next presenter on the line. We're going to take about a 5-minute break for people to get, whatever they need. And then there's a belly dancing class, and you did need to sign a waiver, which is on the website. I can try to put that in the chat too before taking the class, just so that we make sure you're healthy and all of that. You need Anna, do you want to unmute and say what people need to bring?
Hey everyone. So yeah, we'll get started here in about 5 or 6 minutes. We'll give everyone a chance to kind of catch a breath and have get a drink or have a snack. So yeah, so the waiver is important on account of, if you have any health issues or bodily injuries, it's kind of a necessary thing. So if you're going to join the class, please do that. So the class is about 75 minutes long. What you'll need is a yoga mat. And I would recommend, if you have a chance, grab your journal or a little piece of paper. And the reason is because we're going to be doing some yogic breath work with this. And I encourage people to observe how the movements differ with that versus not. It's not required, but again, just encouraging. Be sure to have some water. And if you have any health issues or concerns, please let us know in advance as soon as possible, because I probably won't be able to attend to it once the class starts. And so I have a mic with me, so when I plug the receiver in, I will not be able to hear any of you. So and I'll pull it out periodically to answer questions, but if you have questions during class, please post them in the chat box and I will come back as often as I'm able and check them. And if anyone has any questions currently, let me know. And yeah, we'll get started here in just a minute.
Great, thank you.
Give it, let's see, it's 1:27. We'll give it another few minutes. And let's see, I am.
Excuse me, this is Chelsea.
Yes,
Trying to. I was on the website. I'm trying to find this waiver you're talking about.
I put a direct link right above where Trinity put the links to the website in the chat. So if you want to scroll up just a little bit, you should be able to hopefully see that. It says Jot Pro, www.jotpro something.
I'm seeing a picture of her in her dancing thing.
Here, I'll put it again. It's on the break it down page, but here, this is.
And I'm also on a laptop, not a cell phone, so I don't have a touch screen.
Okay, do you see it in the chat now? I put just the waiver form.
Yes.
Okay, that should get you there directly.
Now, can I sign from a desktop computer?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Cannot see the chat box for some reason. I have it pulled
Sometimes you
up,
have to get it up before you do the, like there's
There
an,
it is.
okay, good.
Yeah, okay. And I see the link for the waiver. Thanks for that, Amara.
No problem.
Give me 1 second. Just one. Okay. All right. It is now 1:30. So, all right. Well,